Started, and we are recording. So, Ron, Tina, I'll let you introduce yourselves and take it away.
All right, thanks, Alex. So my name is Ron Havner. I'm the Director of Security down here at Medford School District. Tina is our security specialist. She's basically my right-hand person here as well. Tina, do you have any words for the group, or you want to hold on?
I think you got it covered.
Okay. And so what we'll do, we have about 45 minutes. Is that true, Alex? Or
Yeah, 45 minutes.
okay. So we're going to throw a lot of information at you. What I will say is if you have any questions, or really I just want to expose everybody to the resources. And if you want to deep dive on any of it later on, give Tina and I a call. We're happy to expound on any of it, tell you our experiences or our lessons learned, and or give you a visit if that helps. So again, hope it's not too overwhelming, but we just want to share what we have. So right here up front is all of our resources and a lot of links to click into. Everybody should have access to the brief, but all these other links are protected, so you may have to ask for access. As long as we know who you are, we will get you access. All right, we're going to talk specifically about reunification today, but we like to hit hard that, a few years ago, we started a significant effort to systematize safety and security across our entire district. And so this is kind of what that systematization looks like. And as you can see, reunification is one of those big chunks. Each one of these puzzle pieces is a whole separate line of effort. But reunification certainly rose to the top when we started getting into the exercise and our day-to-day activities. First thing that we talked about with our superintendent was we need sponsorship beyond just words. We need to start having things come to fruition and actions. And so we worked hard to make sure that safety and security was listed as a shared value and spoken to staff at every opportunity we get. So we want to move these concepts beyond the whiteboard and make sure that they're actually getting operationalized. And we started with seriously, what are our values and what do we stand by? And so if you don't have that in your district already, you may need to start with a conversation with your leadership. We know that sponsorship is critically important to be successful in any of these types of things. All right, so for us, we know that there seems to be some confusion amongst people on the difference between reunification and rally points and things like that. So for us, we really worked off of I love you guys as our foundation for this. And basically what we think of as reunification is a kind of a controlled gradual release to make sure that things are safe. We have accountability and we get students linked back up with the right parent, caregiver, or guardian. And we know that it's scalable. We can do it at a very small scale. We could do it for 50 parents and students, or we could do it for 2,000 at our high school. So we want to build something that we can expand and contract as necessary. Tina, feel free to click in or speak up if I miss anything. All right, so we always talk about, we think about two things when we're thinking about reunification and safety and security in general, which is why we have that layered security approach. But we always think about worst case scenario. So our most dangerous course of action, active shooter, something very significant and traumatic, and our most likely course of action. So most dangerous course of action and most likely course of action. And this is really where we see on a day-to-day, we actually do reunifications not all the time, but more frequently than we would think. And it's really just an expanded version of drop off and pickup. It's just that we have had something occur where we need to be a little bit more deliberate about it. So we've done them for power outages, weather events, police activity in the area, etc. And we'll show you some of those here in a little bit. All right, this is if you need to talk about, why we need to go down this effort. I talk to our team a lot about, we are not competitors to teaching and learning. We are an enabler to teaching and learning. And reunification is a core task, a core critical task that all schools need to be able to do. It shouldn't be something that's like foreign to them. It should just be pick up right what we know we've trained on and then expand that and scale it as necessary. Not something that we're trying to figure out in that unforgiving moment when it happens. So this is just a list of reasons of why having that plan is super important. It goes right back to building trust with our community and our stakeholders It's about every time we do one of these, it's a team building event. And again, just to be honest, the behavior is contagious. And when we have that familiar process and we've set all those conditions up front by messaging with our parents, starting from the day that they in process the school to as we have incidents and parent conferences, etc., it just becomes second nature to them that, hey, if we have something going on, this is how we're going to do reunification. It's very clear the school has a process in place, and we trust that we're going to get our student back. I threw this in here again. You can deep dive on our actual plan, but I pulled out some of these slides just to show. This is if you're looking for your site features. This is kind of what we targeted for in terms of our primary site. I would encourage you to have a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary for the buildings that you own within your district. But I also would then have some type of agreement, MOU, MOA, however you want to set it up with the community. So for us, we have Oakdale as our primary site with the features you see listed here. We have our north and south high schools that we can also surge over to. We own that real estate. And then if worst case scenario happens and for some reason we can't do it in a building that we own, we have things like our armory, our expo, and our Rogue X, our swim/basketball facility. So we just want to make sure that you have a couple wired tight within your inventory and then plans to push out into the community if need be. All right, this is another slide. We have these posted on our walls for people that are critical to reunification. It's just something that we made up. We call it the golden hour of critical reunification tasks. So we know that when an incident happens, there's just some things that we need to get on immediately and get that ball rolling. And then there's some things that need to happen within 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So I would just encourage you to make something like this for your team so that you know, hey, if we need to recall the entire facilities team, that needs to happen here. If we need to pull vehicles and vans back from high schools, that needs to happen here. Because a lot of this stuff gets going real fast. And once that momentum happens, it's hard to slow it down. So it's not meant to be all inclusive. It's just meant to be critical tasks. All right, we're going to talk about two reunifications today. One is that district-led offsite reunification for more of a worst case scenario. You can see our full plan there, which we won't go into completely. And then at the end, we're going to talk about on-site reunification, where it might be weather or police activity in the area, a much less traumatic type incident. And Tina will give us an overview on what's important and 3, 4, 5 slides that you can use to make sure that runs smoothly. But there is a distinct difference, and they should be nested together so that there's some familiarity. But there are some nuances to what it looks like on site versus an off-site one. All right, so just before we start going into our plan specifically, I would say we do SRM plus, and this is standard reunification method. I love you guys foundation. We've talked to John Michael Keys about this and showed him what we're doing, and he's good with it. He understands that districts are going to do some things that work for them, and he's good with that. We're not asking to change SRM, but I would encourage you to figure out what works best for you, what doesn't, and if you need to shift some things around a little bit because that's what works best for you, then so be it. You're still doing SRM. So there are 4 things I'm going to point out here. Is one, we set up a staff reception area. So as we call back district staff, facilities teams, we have kind of a one-stop shop where we bring them, we receive those people, we get them lined out on their assignments and their tasks, hand them their books, etc., and then push them over to the reunification site. So we'll show you what that looks like. The second is we chose a different location for our accountant location, just based on the positioning of that. It seems to work a lot better for us, and I'll show it to you. We chose a little bit different method on how we do reconciliation. So when you get to the verification table, you're going to log the people into the computer using a little tracker, and then that same tracker is on a Google document that is read back at the reunification site. So both sides are communicating on who just entered the system and who just exited the system, and we always have a running kind of tracker of where we're at in the process. We also plan for technology and no technology. So if we had to, we can just use runners. If we have technology power and cell service, then we'll use Synergy and some of our other tools. And then lastly is for command and control purposes, we set up a command post in the middle of the gym, and I'll show you that as well and what that looks like. those are our main 4 differences. The rest of it is pretty similar to what you see on I Love You Guys Foundation for SRM. All right, this is a busy slide. I'm going to show you a couple busy slides. Don't panic. But really what I want you to see is we chose a middle school. We have our annex warehouse down here. We have a stadium, grass fields, 2 parking lots. And so when you're looking for your facility that meets these needs, you can kind of have that visual. We receive staff over here. I'm assuming you guys can see me moving my cursor. Is that true, Tina? Can you see my cursor? Yeah, okay. This is where we receive everybody and get them processed, and then we push them over to the gym where we set up our teams. Parents are coming from this north parking lot and the south parking lot. They have 2 entryways. They get greeters here and here, and then they go through the 4 steps of parent check-in, verification, staging in the bleachers of the covered bleachers of the stadium, and then we pull them into reunification. Students are getting dropped off over here, coming in the back of the gym, getting processed, and then moving into the main gym. And then our 3rd gym here is where we do the actual reunification. I know that's probably not easy for everybody to understand unless you're familiar with the site, but those are the things that I would recommend you add to some type of conceptual layout of what it looks like. We blew this board up onto a kind of an aluminum frame thing that's probably like 4 feet by 2 or 3 feet, and we use this all the time to kind of brief the overall concept of it. All right, this is what it looks like when you come in. Our buses come on drop off here. We try to get them behind a enclosed fence as soon as possible. Speaking of buses, I'd highly encourage you to make a relationship or set up some type of agreement with we have RVTD, which is our city buses, and we use both First Student, which is buses that are contracted to us, and the city buses. They are a great resource if you have anything like that in your area. They get behind the fence. We have flow monitors that bring them in. Best practice for our SPED students is to leave them on site as long as possible, as long as they are safe and comfortable in their space. We're talking about self-contained classrooms. If not, then we'll move them off first. But we want them to stay in place as long as they're comfortable and not in harm's way. Down here in the bottom left, I linked the PEAT plan, so personal emergency accommodation plan. Important for you to get your teams to fill this out in those self-contained classrooms, because you can quickly, you've thought about it ahead of time, you can quickly orient on what are the mobility needs of this student, what kind of supervision is required. Is it 2-on-1? Is it 1-on-1? Are there communications issues? Not only is that beneficial for the security department, the teacher and staff that are doing the evacuation, but also first responders. So we bring students in. Most students come into the gym. The others go over to the cafeteria, which is right across the courtyard, primarily to keep them in an environment where they're less sensitive to the noises and everything else that's going on. All right, we bring ours into the upper gym. We have 3 lines and signs set up. We bring them in, we search them. If it were to be a significant incident, we have our trauma counselors, our first aid station set up in this upper gym, and then as well as security. Our team that runs the account table below, they surge over here. Our first phase of this operation is to receive all students onto site. Once we've received them and they move down into this lower gym area, then we'll shift back over. Phase 2 is where we start to process those students in the reunification area and hand them off to their parent or guardian.
Ron, real quick, here's a good time to say this. It's really important to bring in those students into the building as quickly as you can. And the first time we did this, we kind of backed them up and they were outside, but it's super important just to get them out of sight.
Yeah, we want them out of sight of media and out of sight of parents as soon as possible. All right, again, this is our slide. I know it's a lot, so don't pass out. But again, you can see I would encourage you to make something like this. This is your check-in station. This is where we're going to start controlling that line. We don't want any congestion up into the other places. That line can back up from check-in out. We check our ID card. They move up to verification. This is where we're going to add that bracelet, and we're going to make sure that they're an approved picker-upper. And then here's where you need to figure out your communication. This is where all the students are staged in the gym, and this is where the reunification area is. Here's where you need to figure out that first communication. So we've tested it From verification, parents ready to pick up, we want to call over to the staging area and say, hey, Johnny's dad's here, get him ready. And so we've done radio, we've done text where they give a thumbs up. And honestly, what we've seen working best lately is to take the large part of that card and hand it to a runner and have them walk it over to staging here. And then they just post them on the board. They get that student ready. And then when they come out to the reunification area, they take the small part of the card that the parent has and they take the large part that we sent over to staging. They match them up and they go. But this communication is a critical component of who do you have staged in that staging area after they leave verification, and how are you communicating that to the student management area. And then once they get to staging, remember at this point, they're no longer in a line. They're more of a gaggle. They may not come out of that area in the same order that they came in. They're going to come out when that student is ready. Those students may be receiving medical aid. They may be seeing counselors. They may be doing investigations with police, etc. So here they're just kind of bunched up. And once they're ready, once these students are ready in the staging area, in the student management area, they will call over to staging and the flow monitors will move that parent forward into the reunification area. This reunification area never gets crowded. It has a minimum number of students in there. You basically get linked up. It's under camera. It has the account table right there so they can see that handoff and then immediately do the reconciliation of, okay, this one's complete. And then we have our command posts in there. Our command post allows our reunification commander to kind of lead and be in the right leader positioning of the site while people our command post is receiving calls and problem solving and tracking kind of the operation as a whole. And then and down here, I always put our radio comms plan, make sure you have clear delineation of, hey, this is our command net, this is our security net, this is our reunification net, however you want to break it down. Schools don't tend to be too great at talking on the radio, so we do a lot of practice about, here's how you use brevity on the radio, here's how you break in if you have to, and interrupt if there's something serious, etc. So I would encourage people to integrate talking on your radios as part of your rehearsals. All right, this is the command post itself. We have 3 of our staff here. They run these boards. They know who's in the center. They track all questions, requests for information. They know what comms nets people are on. And really they're just there to kind of have some semblance of continuity so that when the reunification commander comes in or superintendent, we know where we stand. And the command post in there has been a real game changer. This is the board, just if you want to see what that board looks like, some of the things that they were tracking. We always encourage people to time log the incident just because when it's hectic and things are going on, people forget things. And so when we look back and we do our AARs or we're doing our incident analysis, we want to know exactly how things kind of unfolded. So we give the task to somebody to make sure they're doing a time log. All right, we'll quickly go into task organization. I would encourage you we have this all pre-built out, and I would encourage you to go through this exercise, even if it's starting with the tabletop. So we know that our key leadership, our superintendent, our comms director, our deputy superintendent, our assistant superintendent operations, and myself, these middle areas are the tasks that we'll be handling in a significant incident. And then these are kind of people that we're paired with and that are assisting us. So our superintendent's freed up to make decisions, to do communications, and to move where he needs to be. And then you can kind of see it from here what those duties and responsibilities look like. Then we get into the reunification site itself. And remember, this can be scaled. You don't have to have 100 people. We go big just to help build depth in that team. So these are our key areas that we have leaders in. This R represents radio, so we know who has radios. We always build depth in the key positions so that it's not a single point of failure in case somebody's not at work that day. If you click into this area where it says staff reunification, this gets into the teams underneath all of those leads. And again, if we have a small scale incident going on, we might have one person under each of these. If we have a big one, a high school or something that has 2,000, then we're going to fill out all these teams. That's why when you do your recall, you need all hands on deck to come initially, and then you can scale back as needed. But better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
And we also have a blown up one of these, which you can see at the command post, that we put down who actually is at the site and then put that there. That way we know who was actually able to come to the site.
Yep. All right, Tina, you want to talk equipment and supplies?
Sure, we have a dedicated spot for all of our equipment. Ron, can you click on that equipment list right there? And this is just a list of all of the things that we need. We have a setup binder as well that's linked in here on the next slide, and it shows where all of these pieces go. So we have a dedicated area. Everything's clearly labeled in big tough boxes, and then it tells us where we need to put all the things. So is this the setup binder link that you have? Yeah, so this is in a binder. So we have multiple of these made. So if somebody comes to help, we can just give them a binder, and this is, pause there for a real quick sec, Ron. So like the forklift, this is what the forklift needs in here, and it's all clearly matched, labeled in the warehouse. Go ahead and go to the next one.
You want rolls?
Yeah, sure. So within our equipment and our supplies, we have a couple of bins with all the binders, and they're all labeled according to these roles and responsibilities. They all have a vest in them, a lanyard, their directions on what they need to do. Each station has a lead as well as a team. So this way we can give this to anybody that is maybe available and comes on site, and they would have the exact instructions on what to do. And you can go through, and every role is listed there. The accountant, we've listed that separately because that's a little bit more complex, where we have, Ron mentioned, the Google spreadsheet as well as iPad system with Synergy. And I would like to emphasize that it's super important to have a couple of different methods, because if one goes out, doesn't work, some reason technology happens, you have a backup. And so we have those two, and then as well as the paper copy for the runners. But that gives you an idea of each of, and you can click in there and it'll give you each of those roles.
Signage.
Signage. So we have, it's the maps and all the templates and whatnot are there. Again, we have all the signage marked and labeled in a specific spot. Super important to have somebody walk through. I see Rebecca on here. Hi, Rebecca. She helped us with our first reunification. It was good to have a different set of eyes. I mean, we know what we're expecting, and so to have somebody go and look at your signage is super important as well.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate that when we did this in the exercise, we had a lot of our fellow districts. Rebecca was one of them. Come over, be part of it, help give us an external set of eyes, and give us that feedback. So really helpful. And when we know that when something like this happens in the community, it's not about different school districts. It's about a community coming together to support whatever schools in need. So that was really helpful. All right, so this is the community emergency response exercise we did to test all this, and we had about 500 people involved in this. And I'll show you some of the highlights of it. If you want to talk this specifically later, we can. There's basically 3 phases to this. We had the active shooter response, multiple scenarios involved. We had the casualty triage and transport to the hospitals, and then we had evacuation and reunification. And as part of this exercise, we did a community outbrief, and then we have about a 100-page after action review where a lot of these lessons learned are captured, and we'll talk specifically about the reunification ones today. I just want to show, this is our 180-day timeline. I just want to show, we're going to show you some pictures of it here in a minute, but the importance of some of these rehearsals. We did quite a few little mini exercises on our comm side, and we did quite a few rehearsals and walkthroughs for our reunification side. We knew that those were tasks that we didn't want to wait till the day of to train, and so we built it kind of stair-stepping up to the day of the exercise. These are all the resources from that exercise, and again, we'll talk any of this if you want to dive deeper into it. And these are the sustains and improves. So I'll go through each one of these quickly, and again, stop me if you have questions. So first is make sure you have a plan. I can't tell you how many schools we interact with where they don't have a plan at all, or they have never moved that plan past the whiteboard. You got to have a plan in place. You need to exercise it, drill it, and tabletop it, and move it beyond that whiteboard. I've seen schools, ours included, that had a plan in place and executed a reunification flawlessly. And I've seen schools that waited until the moment of need and then decided to try to figure out and do reunification, and it was very painful. So we've mandated that all schools know how to do on-site and that we do an annual rehearsal at the district level. All right, this is what our rehearsals look like. This is a full-scale rehearsal. It doesn't have to be this in-depth. It could be as simple as a walkthrough, a talk-through, a radio comms rehearsal, but to me, rehearsals save lives. And that's the bridge between not having enough time and being able to operationalize our concept and do it well without operating in the perfect world. So leverage and lean on your rehearsals big time. All right, this is just an example of some of the mini rehearsals we did leading up to the exercise, specifically on reunification. We're just walking reunification staff through their stations. There's Rebecca right there on the left, by the way. All right, this is that reception center I was talking about. This is like a one-stop shop, like oil loop shop, right? You just go in, we receive staff. We don't want them going over to the gym yet. We want to bring them in. We set this up in our warehouse. They have all these different stations going in here. We have a single point of entry. They get oriented on what does the leadership look like for this incident. They put their name on this chart right here as they get assigned their position. They pick up their lanyard and badges. They get their binder if they're leads. They pick up vests, radios. They get a water and a snack, and then they get oriented on the mat board, and then they get pushed out to the site. So I would highly encourage you to set up some type of receiving station before you just have a bunch of people showing up at the reunification site, because we got a lot of things going on concurrently at that time. You got setup crews that are setting it up. You have your reunification commander trying to get oriented over there. You don't want 100 people showing up there without having a task and kind of being oriented first.
Yeah, and it's critically important to have everybody go through here. One of the lessons that we learned also was to have flow monitors that are guiding people to your entry to make sure that all your staff goes through that process.
Yep. All right, on this, security literally needs to be your number one priority at all times. The minute you lose security, you're not going to be focusing on the main purpose of that operation. So I would just constantly evaluate, put one of your SROs or your deputies in charge of that, and make sure that you're sustaining that security. We have multiple parents, even on our real world incidents, testing that security perimeter in that bubble, trying to circumvent the system, trying to get their students to open up doors and let them come in. And so you need to make sure you have legitimate security of the site. All right, this is Tina's handiwork. And again, we're a little bit anal on this, but just it's important to be highly organized on this, have this stuff ready to go. We've packaged it up in containers that fit into our trailers of our gators. We have all of our stuff packed into tough boxes with wheels so that if we had to go off site, we can unload this whole thing in less than 10 minutes, easy, no problem. We could probably move this anywhere in town in less than 30 minutes. So make it mobile and make it untouchable, so where you go out there, it's ready, it's there. It's not like, hey, who took the pop-up tents? I haven't seen those since graduation. This stuff sits here, it lives here, it's untouchable, and we lay it out and use it at least once a year during our exercise. All right, this is another exercise takeaway. You see Hero the chaplain dog here. He was the most popular person of the exercise in the student reunification area. But really, I would say getting your trauma counselors, your chaplains, all of your mental health resources, counselors on site. We don't interact with them as much as we do across the community collectively, all in one location. So having a chance where you can bring them in, open up those lines of communication, and not have them, when we think about proximity, we don't want them like tucked in the corner. We want them in the student management area, interacting with staff, assessing whether staff and students are okay, who needs help, and just kind of getting a feel for it. So they're really a huge resource, but you don't want to have the first time you work with them be the day of the incident. And we have set up dedicated areas where they can have that privacy when needed. All right, and then the last one here on the sustains for the exercise was having our law enforcement detectives, investigators on site. We brought all of them in from MPD, and they worked through interviewing students and staff from the scenario that we ran, and just kind of what that would look like, the time it would take, the logistics of it. So again, work through the mental gymnastics of what it looks like to use some of these entities that don't interact with your schools on a daily basis. All right, this is our improves from the exercise. One is we can't underestimate the need for effective communication with parents from cradle to grave, from the start of the incident to the end. And we always promote stay home, stay informed, be ready. But with social media and the world we live in, you're gonna have parents show up there early, and you need to get people out there talking to them, explaining to them what the process is, maybe even texting their student to make sure that they're okay, and just keep those parents informed. And a lot of times they need to be heard. They want to know what's going on, and then they'll relax a little bit. But don't leave them out there on their own, or they'll get rowdy. All right, this was a problem during the exercise. It needs to be crystal clear who has the authority to open the reunification site. And there's one person that has the authority to do that, and that's the reunification commander. Until those conditions are set, even if your superintendent comes in and says open the site, you need to make it clear to him that that's not his decision in this moment. And if he wants to have a conversation with the reunification commander, then that's fine. But we can't have a reunification commander trying to run an operation with people that are opening up sites and making decisions without communication. It gets sideways real quick. So make sure you have some control on who owns the D on that decision of opening up the site itself and announcing the site. Once you announce it, everybody and their brothers coming to it. All right, the radios and the lines, we talked about that a little bit. Just I would harp on the fact that the line starts at check-in. It needs to be backed up from there on out. You can't let congestion get into your stations, and you really need to work on talking on those radios, having those dedicated channels, using the appropriate protocol, cut out the chit-chat and the small talk. Use your earpieces so you have confidentiality when you're talking about a student or a staff member, and then make sure your command post is monitoring those radios. For instance, we saw people that would just rattle off things on the radio, and nobody was even listening on the other side. So just training them to say, Tina, this is Ron, over. And then Tina saying, Ron, this is Tina, over. Okay, now I have an open line of communication. Now I communicate. So really practicing your radio execution. All right, final check-in with the leads. Again, we don't want to rush to failure here, so I highly encourage you, before you open up the site, pull in your leads, do one last check. We made a pre-startup checklist, and this is what that checklist looks like. Myself or Andy Chastain, whoever's running the site that day, we will go down this pre-setup checklist before we open up the site itself, and just work through it, make sure we're good to go, make sure we have a north-south that everybody's comfortable with what we're dealing with, and then shift over, receive the students. Once that phase is done, shift back over and start processing parents and open up the gates. Don't rush to failure on opening it up. All right, this is our student search area we were talking about upstairs. Again, the main thing is bring them all the way in the building, get them out of sight of parents, get them out of sight of media, get them organized in a line, figure out how you're going to search people. We use the handheld metal detectors, and then get them processed. So we have computers at these tables. Once they're searched, they move up to the table. They get input into the tracker. That way we can see who's on site, because not everybody from school might end up on site due to people leaving campus or worst case scenario, casualties, things like that. So we want to account for who showed up physically onto the site. All right, this is we talked about this, ensuring the student search area is inside, and making sure you have that relationship with your city buses if you do have them. They are a phenomenal resource. They had a good leadership, and they had the ability to talk on their comms citywide. So it wasn't interoperable with ours, but if we had to, worst case scenario, communicate, we could communicate through the city buses as well. I'm thinking like earthquakes or something like that. All right, this is a lesson learned. Initially, our staging area was down below and too small. But again, as you start stacking up parents and they really want to be in line, but when you move to the staging area, they're not in line, it's better to have a bigger open area. So we shifted it up to the covered area of the stadium. It's outside the building. Congestion stays where it's at. They have access to the break room. They have access to bathrooms. And this just worked a whole lot better after our second iteration of it. So make sure your staging area is big enough. All right, Tina, do you want to walk them through? This is our on-site reunification, and it's nested and tethered to our bigger picture plan, but it's got some nuances that are a little bit different that Tina can lay out.
So what Ron talked about was the offsite, where we would transport everybody off the site to our reunification site, and it would be a district led. This is if you have something more minor at your site, where you're going to have parents just starting to show up. And we've had, here are a few real world example at North Medford High School. There was a shooting in the neighborhood and a suspect on the run. And so then parents are just going to start showing up, which we've also discovered that communication also helps with parents showing up right away. Because as soon as we know of an incident, we can get that communication out to parents. And then they know that the situation is being monitored. Hedrick, we had a fob that, for an ERB message that went off for a lockdown. Initially, we didn't know if it was real or what the situation was. Again, we had about 200 parents showing up, and we had a lot of lessons learned there. And then our February snowstorm, we had mini reunifications happening at all of the sites as parents were coming to pick up their students. Ron, if you want to just go to the next slide. So one of the things that's similar to the off-site reunification are the 4 steps. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. Initially, you'll have the greeters coming or at the front, and this is also a good place to have your SROs. And then it's important to let them know that there's 4 stations. That way they know kind of what to expect. So we have check-in, verification, staging, and reunifying, just like we do for an off-site reunification. And we would also want to have enough flow monitors to help with the flow. This sign on the left there, we have those for each of our sites that they can put it out for an on-site reunification. So go ahead and go to the next slide. We created these so that each site can print these. These are also applicable to the off-site reunification. They're just a lot more details for the off-site. But so first of all, the greeter would be outside of the building, and this is how we recommend doing it, where they're greeting the parents as they're coming approaching the school. We inform them of the 4 steps. We give them a clipboard, a pen, and a card to fill out. We have 2 different colors, one for Spanish and one for English. And we want to make sure that one card is filled out per student, both sides filled out legibly. And this is also a good place to station law enforcement or an SRO if you have out there in the front. So that's the greeter. So then this is the start of what the parents would be doing. So at check-in station, they're checking that the card's filled out legibly, both sides, one per student, ensuring that we had a couple of people do their own reunification cards, but it's super important to have that perforated edge. Speeds up the process. So we added that for our own people. And this is where the main thing here is to check the ID to make sure it matches the person that's here to pick up the student. And this is where the line will begin to be controlled. So before this, you're going to have a crowd, but we would only let a couple people in at a time starting at the check-in. So that's where the line is controlled. So then the next station is verification. They verify the person picking up as approved to be a person that is allowed to pick up the student. So they would verify that in their school information system, which we have Synergy, and make sure they were approved. If they're not approved, there's other measures that we can take to arrange for that person to pick them up. We would list, this is a Google spreadsheet that we use for offsite reunification. It looks a little different for offsite, and the procedure's a little bit different. Because offsite, we're wanting to get to reunify all the students. On-site, you're only going to be reunifying the students of the parents that happen to be picking up. So you might do it for 200 people, you might do it for 100 people. So over here we would list the parent that's picking up, the student's name, and then we have it conditionally formatted by that second column. And so once they're on site, we would type on site and it turns that column orange. And then later on for the account, when we, did you type in? Oh yeah. later on, they would mark it complete and then it turns a green. So immediately at the beginning and at the end, you can see who's here and who's picked up that student. It's that verification that you would put on a wristband. That way we know that that person is verified and approved to pick up. We give them the smaller portion of the card and we retain the large portion of the card at that station, which would be used for runners. Then we would direct the parents to the staging area. And again, the flow, you would want a flow monitor there depending on how your setup is to guide them that way. And okay, staging area, like Ron said, it's not just a few people. You're gonna have more of a gaggle here. You're just waiting to you're waiting for the students to be brought to you. This area is not a line. They might not necessarily come out in the order that the parents came in. This might also be an area to have law enforcement or an SRO staged here. And then we get to the fourth step, reunify. The runner brings the student to the reunification area. Staff will retrieve the parent from the staging area, reunite the parent and the guardian. The student and the guardian. And then confirm that the parent has a wristband. If the parent doesn't have a wristband, we need to go back through and see why they don't. We'll match the large portion of the card with the small portion. On the card there, we like to take where they're going. That way, if another parent shows up, we have that information. And then this is where you would update on that same Google spreadsheet, complete. That way we know that Ron has picked up Luke and they're headed home. That way, if another parent shows up, you have that information at your fingertips, which is a very beneficial part as well. Okay. Next slide.
All right. So again, just these were, the schools don't practice this as much. And so having these one sliders printed out, laminated, where they can literally just set it on the table and say, these are the duties you're going to do, is very helpful, because they tend to confuse the stations if they haven't done it in a while.
Ron, let me say one other thing. Ron and I have also met with every site and walked through an on-site plan, and then they either have done their rehearsal or will do a rehearsal for on-site as well.
This is, I won't go too far into this scenario, but this is an example of a situation that led to reunification. I would say it's very likely that you're going to have a large portion of your school staying and continuing to run school, continuing to have to feed them and secure the campus. And then you're going to have 250, 300, 400 parents that show up and say, give me my student. So I would prepare to run both of those operations concurrently. We do a storyboard for every significant incident. Basically, this is situation, sustains and improves, and anything specific we need to talk about this one. This helps us capture the lessons learned and kind of cross-pollinate and share them across the district. And then it gives us a good repository of scenarios where people can quickly pull off a scenario and do a quick tabletop if they only have 15, 20 minutes and they don't have time to make a scenario, and then they can see what were those real world lessons learned. So it's just a way that works well for us. You guys can, we have all these resources. We have the reunification video for parents. We have kind of a reunification simple cheat sheet that, you know, feel free to take any of it and make it your own. This is a good example of, even though when we had a trying situation and a long day, the parents knew the process. They really just leaned into it. They were dropping off flowers and pizzas and chocolates and notes. So it was a kind of a win for the community to know we had a situation, but the school had a system in place and it worked. All right, this is what we'll leave you with today. We know that we gave you a lot of information. But really, I would say if you haven't secured that sponsorship, the number one factor in success or failure of a project or an initiative or a line of effort is actual sponsorship. If you don't have that sponsorship with your superintendent and your leadership team, sit down and have that conversation, and just know that we're not competing with teaching and learning. We are an enabler to it. If we cannot keep our schools safe and secure, we're not going to be doing a whole bunch of teaching and learning. So have that conversation as needed. Second is create that awareness as to why. You know, we all wish this wasn't happening, but we've had thousands of school shootings across our nation. catastrophic generational level trauma to our students. There's enough examples out there. Almost every single time we talk about this, I can go back to the week prior and say, hey, this incident just occurred here, and we need to be ready for it if and when. There's no magic fence around Oregon. We've had multiple school shootings in Oregon over the years. We've had near misses in our own community. You need to have a plan. You're negligent as a district and as a leadership team if you do not invest in preparedness and have that plan. And I don't mean that as a guilt trip. I'm just saying you don't want to be caught in that unforgiving moment of need and not be ready. It's going to be stressful enough. It's not enough to just talk about this. It's not enough to draw a schematic on the board and say, yeah, we got it, we'll figure it out. Drill it, plan it, drill it, exercise it, tabletop it, and talk about it. Integrate this and make sure this is part of your day-to-day operation. And then for us, we do an annual rehearsal, district-led, every year. It's a non-negotiable. We bring the entire team together and execute that. And then every year we have our on-site, all of our sites do an on-site planning session with us to refresh and then make sure they do a rehearsal. This is a low-cost, no-cost effort. It takes probably 15-20 minutes and you can get a good little session in there at the school. Most of them do it right after a drill, and so it's really no big deal. Sometimes they bring parents in to participate in it to help orient them to it. And lastly, but not least, I would encourage you to make AAR a way of life. That's your after action review. We AAR literally everything, and it just really is about continuous improvement and getting better. And again, we're all in this together, so we'll share those lessons learned honestly and transparently as needed. So pending any questions, I appreciate the opportunity to do this. Thanks, Tina, and thanks, Alex and Mitch. Anything you guys let us know.
Thanks, Alex and Mitch.
Yeah, thank you both, Tina and Ron, for this fantastic information and very well presented from Medford School District. I'm going to stop the recording now, but like I said, early on, we'll stay on for questions or requests for assistance.